Folks, come on in, take a seat. People are coming in from the 9 o'clock service. We're getting stuff going online. Keith will let us know when we're ready, and we'll get going. I want you to sit anywhere. All right. I'm going to sit. It's sort of like the McLaughlin group. I'll be sitting right here in the middle. So.
There's a mic that's on there. Yeah, and then I can even just be here or I can be down here playing.
Yeah, just either way. We'll do it. I think it'll be fine. Okay. So I think if people want to come on in, we're going to get started. We're still waiting for one of our panelists. And one of our panelists just had something come up and couldn't make it. So, so just move over, and actually we can go ahead and put that chair back. It was meant to be for Jason. So, great, and we'll do this. A whole herd of creative people on stage. It's such a wonder we're having trouble getting organized. Come on in, everybody. So I'm going to get started just so I can get my part out of the way, and we can get going as folks are coming in. So both here at All Saints Church and online, welcome to the forum this morning, where we're looking at artists, art, and the pandemic. And as we've already sort of had conversations about, the pandemic is both past and present, and it's looking like increasingly future. And so we're really going to be looking at what is that intersection of art, artists, and the pandemic. And we are joined by just an amazing group of people, and I'm so just thankful for all of you being here. I'm going to do some really, really brief introductions. Mike Hernandez. I'll just go this way. Mike is an artist in residence at Mission Gathering Christian Church in Pasadena. His works include an interactive outdoor sculpture. He completed an exhibit in 2017 called Decalogue Chapel, the Ten Commandments Recontextualized. It reframes the Ten Commandments within a contemporary social justice context. His work explores the intersection between religion and politics, and I'm going to let you talk about some of your more recent stuff. So it's great to have you here, Mike. Jason Luckett, we just saw. Jason is a wonderful All Saints parishioner. Jason is a musician, a techie. How else would you introduce yourself, Jason?
I'm a musician. I'm a composer. I write essays, and I love to participate in these sort of things. So very
humble.
Great, yeah, and you may know Jason from some of the work that he's done in liturgy at All Saints Church. And Jason is also a part of something that formed here at All Saints during the pandemic, which we sort of loosely call the creative team. Amy Brenneman. Amy was one of the co-conveners of that. Amy, you are a longtime All Saints parishioner, actor, producer, probably best known for your roles on NYPD Blue, Judging Amy in Private Practice. And you're a fierce advocate for social justice, particularly reproductive rights, and you're currently filming a TV series called The Shining Girls. Is that right? Or did you wrap that?
I wrapped that, and now I'm working with the beloved Jeff Bridges, who is healthy now. I don't know if you followed that. So we will be doing that in February.
Wonderful. Reena Esmail works between the worlds of Indian and Western classical music, brings communities together through the creation of equitable musical spaces. I love that. She is the Los Angeles Master Chorale's 2020 to 2023 Swan Family Artist in Residence and the Seattle Symphony's 2020 to 2021 Composer in Residence. Jenny Wong is currently the Associate Artistic Director of the Los Angeles Master Chorale. This season, she was one of 9 national recipients of Operas America's inaugural opera grants for women stage directors and conductors. This season also marks her conducting debut with the Pasadena Symphony. And of course, most importantly, she was also the interim director of music here at All Saints Church. So welcome home, Jenny. And finally, Vijay Gupta is a violinist and social justice advocate. In 2010, he founded Street Symphony, a nonprofit organization providing musical engagement, dialogue, and teaching artistry for homeless and incarcerated communities in Los Angeles. The organization performs at jails, shelters, and transitional facilities. And he is the 2018 recipient of the MacArthur Genius Grant, which is always good for the ego. So, and Vijay, we can't just talk about art, we need to experience art, and you have agreed to sort of start us off and activate our right brains a little, and you want to share a piece with us.
Yeah, perfect. Happy to activate right brains and right hearts. Good morning, everyone. It's a real honor to be here. I'd like to play for you a short piece of music called When the Violin, composed by Reena Esmail. And this is a piece that is based on a poem by the 15th century Iranian Sufi mystic Hafiz. And Hafiz actually wasn't his full name. His full name was Khwaja Shamsuddin Muhammad Hafiz al-Shirazi. And Hafiz is actually a ceremonial term. It's a term for someone, designated for someone who has memorized the entirety of the scripture, in this case, the entirety of the Quran. The poem on which this piece is based is as follows. When the violin can forgive the past, it starts singing. When the violin can stop worrying about the future, you will become such a drunk, laughing nuisance that God will then lean down and start combing you into her hair. When the violin can forgive every wound caused by others, the heart starts singing.
want to just breathe for a minute. So I want to start out actually having each of you have a chance to sort of answer the same question and talk about the same thing, and then we'll sort of dive in and we can riff off each other and see what happens. And it's interesting, Vijay, and actually and Reena too, because that was a beautiful piece that you wrote, that also is a piece of my experience of the pandemic, because you recorded that piece here at All Saints Church during the pandemic, and at a time when our campus, the outside of our campus, had a lot going on with members of our community living there. The inside buildings were not being used, and you came and just filled the space with this beautiful music. And for me, it was a reminder of the beauty that had filled the space and that would again. And so, just I'll start with you. What was it like for you as an artist during the pandemic? What opportunities were closed off? Were there new ones open up? Did you experience yourself differently as an artist? How did that change? Just sort of reflect on the experience.
Yeah. Making music here at All Saints during the pandemic was an especially remarkable gift because I was recording. And recording, for many artists, for many performing artists, is absolutely terrifying because it is like looking in the mirror naked. You have no help, especially if you're recording solo. I mean, there were times, of course, I was playing duets with the gardeners at City Hall and the leaf blowers right outside. But what was remarkable in terms of making music here at All Saints is that I was never alone. The moment that I started playing in the sanctuary, there was a sense that I was communing with something far bigger than myself. And I think about the time that this pandemic, the opportunity that this pandemic gave us as artists to embrace wonder, to embrace that sheer terror of transcendence, where every definition that you make of yourself must be forgiven in the sense of being thrown out the window. There are no more performances on the calendar. There are no more opportunities to prove oneself in the battleground of the concert hall. It's just you and the terrifying mirror. And I think that for all of us, I mean, I won't speak for all of us, but I think for the royal us, the mirror was shattered, right? We saw parts of ourselves that we weren't ready to see. And in a strange way, I've been thinking about the metaphor of how the artistic practice is both a mirror and a lens, right? It's a mirror through which we see the reflection of ourselves, but it's also a lens through which we see the world. And in that sense, that shattered mirror kind of becomes a kaleidoscope in and of itself, right? It gives us these various different lenses to look through which we understand the world beyond us and through which we understand ourselves. And I've been so grateful to find that literal point of resonance upstairs. So I think I'll pause there.
I now realize what a poor decision it was for me to sit next to this man. No, it's all good. We're still friends. I think for me, the pandemic has been incredibly strange because as a conductor, my instrument is not something that I have at home with me. My instrument is actually through other people playing and singing in harmony. And so during the last 18, 19, lost track, months, that was gone. And as Vijay alluded to, the stage and the concert hall was gone. And so it really challenged us to think of what then becomes your stage. And that then like the stage really becomes where you go to meet people where they are from corners of the world. And we had to be creative, and it's funny, Vijay talks about doing recordings, because I was actually the person at the end of the receiving end of the recordings. And so I was sitting at a desk for a very long time listening to multiple individual voices and appreciating the beauties, the differences, the similarities, and then putting them back together to create, as some of you know, these digital productions. But the reason I'm mentioning that is that the biggest thing I think I personally took away from the pandemic is listening. When time slows down so much that everything shifts, and you realize that you no longer have to make the same decisions, often quick decisions, you actually get to reconsider, is this the best we can do? Then you start actually making some different decisions. And what was really valuable in hindsight, at the time it was very frustrating, but in hindsight, to realize that we could not reap results right away. We had to actually pause, realize that we can't do this in real time together, but what seeds can we sow for the future? I think that was one of the biggest opportunities, and to listen to what music the world needs and respond to what's happening around us through music. I think that was one of my takeaways.
It's great to talk to after both these two, because they're the people I've been some of the closest within the pandemic. Vijay, obviously, more so because I see him 24 hours a day. But it's really interesting being a composer in this situation, because, you know, unlike most other musicians, I'm not a performer, and most of my work is done in complete solitude and isolation. So in a certain way, I think for the first 6 months of the pandemic, I was like, oh, I can actually do my job now, because I'm not being asked to go places and do stuff. I can actually really focus on writing music. But it was so many interesting things happened. I mean, one was that after about that first 6 months, I realized that there is a cycle for composers, and you're not just writing into a void and, you know, sending it off, you're also hearing your music, and you're hearing how people are responding to your music, both performers and audiences, and that went away. And I think after about that 6-month period, I couldn't find the way to have input, and then it really affected the way that I had output. And then on the other side, what was so interesting is that, of course, people are looking to creative artists to be like, please help us parse this time. But I was like, I'm here with you. You know, I'm looking at the same things you're looking at. I don't have any special insight that you don't already have. It's just that my way of expressing it is, you know, through music maybe. And so it's really a strange thing to be asked, and I mean, you know, to be commissioned by organizations of like, please respond to this time when you yourself haven't parsed it. And I mean, I'm thinking to myself, you know, here we are all still sitting here in masks, you know, we don't know, there's like a new variant going on. And so I don't know when I will actually be able to relax enough to see it in the rearview mirror, because it's not in the rearview mirror for me now still. So, you know, in a strange way, I've worked harder than I've ever worked because of that need for people to find art to parse things through this time. And I'm just really badly in need of a vacation. But on the other hand, you know, I feel like I'm still with everyone, and I'm still looking at the same world that we're all looking at. So, yeah.
Amy, I'll hand off to you.
I love hearing from people that do different things. I just love it. I was like, oh, a composer. What was that like? It's like my... well, I said to Mike last Sunday, as I was thinking about this Sunday, that my kind of capitalistic productivity brain, my first thought was like, I didn't do jack shit during the pandemic. I didn't produce any screenplay, I didn't do anything. And then the next thought was like, oh no, I helped my mother die. Oh, that's right, that's right, that's what I did. But I think more, and I also was thinking I came off of, just luck of the draw, an extraordinarily busy I mean, I was just on a roll. I just was like, I did this, I did that. I mean, 2019 and 2018 were just sort of like these very busy times, and we can't always plan those things. And then from January to mid-March 2020, I was working with Jeff Bridges on this Hulu thing, and I mean, what a gift that was, because he should be up here too. But I was and then we were going to go to Morocco mid-March to the end of June. And I remember saying in my prayers, going like, I'm just too happy. Something's going to happen. And then it was funny that midweek, March, we all know it, 9th to the 13th, it was like, we might be going to Morocco, we might be going to Santa Clarita. It's like, no, nobody's doing anything. So it went from being very busy to the echo that we're talking about. And overall, because I have been thinking, it's been such a gift even just to kind of reflect. I would say the word that comes, well, I just was, spoke at a friend's a Zoom acting thing, and a graduate program, and they talked about being a citizen artist. And I was like, oh, I love that. And I would say the biggest thing that has remained, that happened, I went from having plans to being utterly responsive and using the gift that I was given to be of service. And last summer I went to this jazz club in Mass. I was so happy to see live music, and I was watching the drummer look at the lead guy, and he didn't take his eyes off him. And I was like, that's what I want to be as a collaborative, both with my human collaborators, but with also God. Like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? And so when my mother passed in the middle of March, and Mike was a big part of that, and at first my brothers and I were like, well, we'll wait until there's, And then about a couple weeks later, I was like, we got a bunch of filmmakers. I was like, I think we can create sacred space on a Zoom. And we sort of did. Or like even on Adobe, this job I just did, they're like, can you sing punk rock? And I was like, yes. I totally can do that. I was like, I cannot do that. But I was like, that's what I'm being. Do you want to direct Newsies at your son's high school? Like, sure. Like, I feel like almost every day there's like, what do you want me to do? Because my plans are ridiculous at this point. But I don't mind living in that. And I don't know, and maybe it's because now I'm just at that point of life. I don't ever want this to be in the rear view, actually. It's okay. It's like we just stay. It's like if I can just channel that like jazz drummer, it's like, what's being asked of me? It's actually a very alert stance for me, rather than my ego deciding I need X, Y, and Z.
Hello. When the pandemic hit, for me, is it closer? Okay. I think I got the filter in here, and so you can't hear anything probably. Yes. Anyway, so when I work a lot, and I just try to respond, and I was going, I perform live, and that's what I do, and I'm used to the feedback from an audience. And when the pandemic hit, it was just like nothing. What am I going to do? And I'm a solo performer, so I work alone. So working alone in the pandemic was kind of expected and okay, but I always collaborate with my audience. That's what I'd always done. So when things stopped, freaked out for a little bit, joined this creative team with Amy and Mike and people and Melissa and who else is here? And Monique's here. What was so interesting is that in this isolation, I learned how to collaborate in a way. I really collaborated with great artists, and really on a deep level, and it was such a gift to be able to do that. So also the idea of the listening. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about just listening like a musician, right? And you really need to listen before you can participate. And that was another gift, and I just want to amplify what you're saying about listening to God, listening to your community, and finding ways that you can be of service through your creative gifts. And so I'm really grateful for that. Also, I did have the time to sort of reassess the ways that I did things, and that has been a big blessing. And I'm happy to be here on this journey with y'all. Thanks. Go for it.
A new microphone here. I'm Mike Hernandez, and I'm a visual artist. And so I'm a painter, photography, sculpture, and site-specific installation. And I'm also a family man. My biggest fans are right here in the front row. And I have an older daughter who just turned 20 from my first marriage. So I've been doing fatherhood for 20 years now. 10 more to go. That's it, right? And one great thing about visual art is you don't need anybody to give you permission to do it. You can go into your studio. So my experience of the pandemic started with about 9 months before the pandemic hit. I made the best deal of my life, which there's a church at the end of our block, right by Victory Park, that restarted as a progressive and inclusive, open and affirming Christian church. And I said, well, I'm an artist living across the street. Let's strike a deal where I curate art shows for the congregation, focusing on the clash between religion and politics, in exchange for a 1,000 square foot side chapel that is now my studio. And so I, in the first 9 months of landing that studio and walking across the street and having my garage be my workshop and the studio be the clean space, I wasn't actually making my own work. I had dedicated 50 to 60 hours a week helping a local artist who his career has just taken off, and I was fabricating for her and paying down debt and happy to be working so much. I'm a freelance person. I bounce between making my own work and installing art for clients. And then the pandemic hit, and we needed cash, and they opened up unemployment for freelance people, and I qualified, and that really saved us. And I thought for the first bit of the pandemic, this is going to be great. My wife works full time. I'll be with the kids. I'll make art, and I quickly realized that being a visual artist, I need big blocks of time all to myself to really create. And so the first year was mostly dedicated to fatherhood in a way that I thought this might be my one and only chance to ever be a father like this. And we did an outdoor pod with our friends, like three families a day max, where we had the church grounds and we had families separated, and each family had their own bathroom. And again, we're just, and this allowed us to do school outside of the home. So we could do school at the church and then walk home and leave school there. And so it became community building, and I just realized this is part of my art. This is my art right now. And I did have 3 chances in the past year and a half to focus on some projects. The first was a burst of work I did after the murder of George Floyd. And then right before the election, we were talking like when you're just that frantic, like I got to do something or I'm going to lose it here. So I curated a show at the church called The Biblical Imagination, which was a group show of 8 artists, and we were able to get people into the sanctuary one at a time to see the show during the worst part of winter. And then I just completed a sculpture that was hiked to the top of a mountain in the desert. It was like a 2-week process to get it up there, and it was called Akedah Altar, and it's a reinterpretation of the Abraham and Isaac story. And I think I was very impacted by dedicating myself to fatherhood, because that project deals a lot with being a father and the future and children. So it was a wild ride.
And thanks to you, I had a chance to see that last exhibit. So it was amazing, and maybe we can share the YouTube video later that you have of that. So first of all, can we just have a round of thanks. And I want to make sure that we have plenty of time just for conversation here. So I want to sort of throw one thing out there, and then we've got 5-6 different mics, and so people just sort of jump in. And it's actually not one of the things that I wrote down before. So one of the things that came up in various incarnations, probably most directly when you said, I didn't do jack shit during the pandemic, was sort of the commodification, how we measure our productivity sort of by the commodification and sort of the value that's placed on it. And one of the things I noticed during the pandemic is we started talking about essential workers. And there were people that were often included in that conversation, and then people who weren't. And artists generally were not included in that conversation. Clergy weren't either, by the way. And yet, when you hear people, I think you said, I've missed going to live music, and there's, I wonder if there is an essentiality to art and the artist that is being rediscovered. I mean, what is your sense in the world of the changing role of art and the artist, and what effect has this experience, or what effect is this experience of the pandemic having on it?
I think there's a craving to be physically together in a safe way. I think that for as much as, and I do both. I mean, my mother tongue is live performance, theater baby, but then I also do film and television and Zoom, and we did plays on Zoom, and we kind of figured out a lot, the memorial that we did for my mom, older folks from different coasts. So you go, okay, that's great, and that's here to stay, and this technology is really awesome. And we are embodied. We are in bodies. We miss being together. So I feel like, when I was talking to my sister-in-law last night, and it's like, we saw Elvis Costello, we showed our Vax cards, we were able, so, it's as much as, and, as a film person, for decades, it's be like, people won't go to movie theaters anymore because they can, see stuff at home. And we do see more and more stuff at home. And and thank God, during the pandemic, we were able to consume that way. But I see both what I'm drawn to and what I see around me is how can we be together? The soft animal, Mary Oliver heart is not fed by screens, or that part of our hearts. So I see that around, and we're going to do it safely, and we're going to figure it out. But that did not go away. And I think that was part of my fears, like everybody's going to be isolated, nobody's going to hug. And it's like, oh my God, that longing, that Richard Rohr longing, I think is part of having bodies.
I was going to say, I've been thinking, sorry. I can't tell if it's on or not. I've been thinking a lot, when this essential worker thing happened, I was the first person to be like, oh my gosh, what I do is not essential. Like, that's fine. Like, people should, people who are really saving people's lives should be, getting priority. But I think there's a difference between essentialism and the need for aspiration. And I think, the same reason we come to church and we have religion, it's aspirational, right? We want to be a certain kind of person. We don't show up because we're that person already. We show up because we're aspiring to be greater than we are. And I think music and art is the same way. It allows us to think broader than the world that we see. And I think during this time I've been reflecting on the fact that there's such a great so many people are leaving their jobs, and that's a real thing that's happening these days. And it's because people have maybe had a chance to think a little bit more broadly about what they want their lives to be. and they want to maybe aspire to something different than the road that was set up for them and they thought they just had to follow. And so when I think about just the aspirational quality of both spirituality and of art, I think, you know, that in a certain way is essential and is creating real changes in the things that are considered essential in our world. So, yeah.
You know, I remember reading last July that the first responders, people who we, you know, consider, you know, paramedics, emergency workers, police officers, that they were starting to display serious trauma responses, secondary trauma responses, because the first response was not fully complete. The first response of being able to grieve with someone, being able to console someone, being the first point of contact of saying, this person is gone. The first point of comfort for the family is the completion of the first response. And that the first response is not complete. And that the work of artists is to be the next response. The meaning makers, the metabolizers. Right, and I think akin to what Reena is saying, that like spirituality, like justice, like love, like education, art is a practice. And so there is the commodity of art, there is the noun of art, the thing, and then there is the verb of art, right? There is the connection, there is the continuation, there is the life and hope and nextness of art that I think really boils down to concrete daily practices. How we choose to look at the world, how we choose to see ourselves in the world from breath to breath and moment to moment is an artistic, spiritual justice practice. And I think that the desire for communion with another person is also the desire of communion with ourselves, right? And I grew up in and actively practice a Hindu faith. And one of the words in Sanskrit that I grew up with is this word sadhana, S-A-D-H-A-N-A, transliterated. And, you know, many of you who have any kind of daily practice, whether it's a yoga practice or a running practice or a feed your children practice, you have a sadhana, right? And so I've been thinking a lot about this idea of a creative sadhana towards the end, not of creating a thing that can be bought, but rather creating this sort of internal repertoire of practices that allow us to be more present and make meaning of the world around us.
Just inspire me. I mean, but just to piggyback on what you just said, it's like a physical practice, and then you can respond. You're ready to respond. You know what I mean? Rather than like having your own crap of like, oh, my stuff is dumb, or I haven't practiced for a while. It's like you're ready. You're like, it's like, what do you want me to do? How can I serve? I love that.
I guess so Mike, you talk about art as a commodity. So recently in a conversation with a colleague, we were talking about the last year and a half with how arts organizations have seen to varying levels, seen our world, our communities, what the role of art could be in these communities. And I was saying, yeah, I mean, it's been amazing, even though, like, you know, it's been like terrible, but also we've learned so much. Like, I've learned so much personally working within an arts organization. I've seen so much more of what we can do. I think there's like a huge momentum and huge hope for how we can really create art that really reflects our world, our current world, but also speak to our current people. And this colleague said to me, do you think that things are going to return to how they were? And I said to her, oh no, I really think there's like this great hope, and yeah. And then like within the week, of course, several things happened in the arts world, whether music or otherwise, that made me really take pause. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think part of the pandemic has also been, how to say this, really important in making us aware that yes, art is incredible, and for the most part, we've been incredibly fortunate to be among artist communities where people really try to create harmony, but also in art spaces, there can be still all the things we see in the world because these spaces are also created by imperfect humans with flaws. And so I think maybe that's the part, that's also the not all rosy part that I want to share as well, because all those things, racism, discrimination, misogyny, all of those things, we've still been experiencing in these last 18 months, even away from each other, doing what we love doing. And that's something we need to change, because art, as Reena was saying, it is aspirational. It is what we want to share that helps people heal, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes those spaces still hurt us. Sometimes we still feel like, how are we going to keep doing this and create a better world when we ourselves are being hurt by it? That's just where my brain went, so, yeah.
Thank you. Mike or Jason?
Yeah, when being hurt by it is a place where a lot of art comes from, and it's super important. It's super important to be able to address that hurt and that pain. I think through your art, and it's super important to have community that can support us when we're experiencing that, and it's really hard to reach out for that. But I do think that some of the technologies that we've experienced that have come into our lives through the pandemic, like Zoom, have created spaces for us to find affirmation and strength. We've done that, and I'm grateful for that. And yeah, just I know that watching what happened watching what happened to George Floyd, all of the stuff that we dealt with in the past year has been very difficult, and also I have been very grateful to have to address it for myself, not necessarily for institutions. Being asked to address it sometimes for institutions can be a pain in the ass. But I am grateful for people that I've met through the institutions and other places that have supported me when I do need to write about this stuff and do need to challenge myself to stand strong in the face of all of those injustices and all of those trials that we go through every day.
Yeah, and visual arts are all about commodities and objects and selling, and one of the things that I think is a gift to me in the past 20 years I used to work at the Armory Center for the Arts. Then I did, as a freelancer, I have clients who have amazing collections all over the city. I've worked for galleries, I've worked for artists. So I get to see the production and the consumption of art in so many different contexts. I'll be at a welder's shop in Compton one moment and a celebrity's house in Hollywood Hills the very next moment. So I see these drastic differences in the way things get created and things get consumed. And so yes, I'm also fearful of things quickly ramping up back to normal. There's an economic engine that wants us back in the machine, and it frightens me. And the visual arts are ramping up, the galleries are ramping up to sell, sell, sell. And a lot of visual artists like myself are really asking hard questions of what are our goals? What does success look like? Because something about walking back and forth across the street from our house to a church with children in tow and having a nice little life that was not spent driving all over this city every day. Something about that I really want to keep. And a lot of my friends are asking these questions of how to be a visual artist, how to produce objects now.
Wow, thank you. I want to open it up to folks here. Melissa, we can maybe between the two of us, we can do this. Questions, thoughts? Get Gloria there, and then I'll get Jenny.
Hi. First, I want to thank all of you for being here. I think all of us needed to hear that from you, so thank you for that. I find myself pondering the word essential, and have been for quite some time now. And I think in the beginning of the pandemic, the word essential meant something we hadn't recognized before. We knew that people worked for us, but we never knew that the bakery workers, the grocery workers, the nurses, whatever, we never really thought about the essentiality of that. And that became very clear to us. But our basic human needs were filled by, when we were hungry or when we were sick or we needed warmth or whatever. But as the pandemic went on, the word essential changed for many of us, and we began to say, what's essential now? I've got a roof over my head, luckily, I have food to eat, but something's missing, and that became the essential nature of art. And we craved, British mysteries on TV, we craved puzzles, we craved visual things on Zoom. That was a real missing essential part of our lives that we still haven't gotten back completely. But you see people flocking to Descanso Garden to look at the lights, because that's an essential part of our humanity. When you think about what do we want to aspire to, we want to be actualized. We want our emotions met. We want to feel comfortable. That's what art gives us. And I think the word essential has changed from the beginning until now. And you all have made that very clear to all of us, so thank you.
Thanks.
Hi. I think I had contact with every single one of you during the pandemic. And whether it was saying goodbye to a child that I had taught in choir and had to drive out to your house and give back beads, or I'm doing one of your pieces on a concert coming up, or you making music in the church was so important to me. And Jenny, there were so many texting sessions, I can't even keep track of them. And we sang backup for you on one of your pieces. And good Lord, Mike, your children running around and making virtual choirs, and how you had to deal with all of that. I wrote a blog that was called First Responders of a Different Kind. And that was like last May. And every single person in the arts stepped up in different ways than they ever thought they would have had to. And it was like you scrambled into place to do it. And composers were joining Zoom sessions with choirs all around the country and talking about their music. And that was so cool, because we never would have taken the time to do that. And so many composers were given of their time for free. We had Dan Forrest, and we had Craig Howlett Johnson come, and we would never met these people at all. And so there are ways that artists stepped up that I don't think people know about, and they were giving of their time into classrooms to help kids who were in the arts, who we're now all of a sudden individuals in boxes. You know, I think doing choir was just a nightmare, and I can't even. But I just think, I think the new step is what are those good things that we could do still? What do we never want to do again? And how did it change us? I think we're all thinking that. But what are the good things that you can take away besides not having to drive your kids all over, LA during traffic? But what are some of the good things that we can still hold on to?
What do you think? Go.
I was just going to say, hearing both of you talk about what it means to be essential makes me think that maybe essentialism is in the eye of the beholder. Maybe we don't ask whether we are essential, but we ask what is essential to us, Because you can never know. You're right. I did so many Zooms for so many classrooms, and, who knows? Maybe some people were like, oh, this is an hour of my life I'll never get back. But maybe some people are like, that really changed me. That was important. And I think it's not for us to know whether we are essential, but to put our best out into the world and hope that that is essential to someone else.
So during the pandemic, Reena and I got a puppy. Speaking of essential. And we would have long, arduous morning conversations about racism and systemic inequality, and sweet Rusty would be sitting there, and after hearing us talk for like 30 minutes, he would go, and what was remarkable about that is just that essential moment to pause and laugh and find joy and wonder and seek out, and it's not a matter of being Pollyanna-ish or naive to the weight of these issues. But I think one thing I never want to forget is the necessity to remember that transcendent moment of just laughter, and often that's a sort of laughter at oneself, right? The laughter in self-recognition of like, oh my God, can you believe I believed that? Can you believe I did that? And I think that kind of, in a strange way, boils back down to sort of self-forgiveness, looking at oneself in a different way. But one thing I've been thinking about recently is this idea of transcendence and wonder. And I don't know if, I know there's so many amazing readers who are in this room. There's the work of a psychologist named Scott Barry Kaufman, who was given access to the Maslow estate to actually rejigger the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And so instead of the pyramid, he has the sailboat concept, where you've got the sort of, the pyramid is the sail of the sailboat, but the boat is transcendence. The boat is the need for wonder, right? And that we're all in this conveyance together, perhaps the sort of aspirational nature of looking towards something that is not about defining down, but aspiring up, right? How do we look this way as opposed to this way? And that's just something that comes to my mind.
I also think that I love what you just said about, because that joy is a sign of protest kind of thing. I've been thinking about that a lot, and I think that partly what we do as artists, partly what we do here in All Saints, partly what mystics do, is we create a world. We literally, in my world, it'd be like, oh, we're gonna put that role ahead of Gabler with an actress who used a wheelchair. It's like, like immediately, it's like, I've never seen that, right? Here's a world that we can do. But I love that idea of kind of defiant joy. If for no other reason than the news wants me to bump it out, and I'm a bit of a rebel, and I'm like, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm done, I want to hold everything, obviously. I don't want to be in denial, but I realize, like, I can read the news in the same amount that I'll read something nourishing spiritually. Like, it is a diet, and I am responsible for my diet. But ultimately, in my neck of the woods, it's like, let's do as much, like, we get this dystopian thing, right? But then it's like, let's actually create, crazy Jim Cameron. It's like, ooh, what was Avatar? Why did that speak to us so much? And I will say, the last thing I'll say is, the pandemic really has shown us, like, we just never really know what's going to happen. And so even on that, crappy election day a month ago, and I was like, oh, God, like, this is going to lead to this, it's going to lead to this, it's all bad. And then I was like, well, we don't really know what's going to happen. And I said to my son, like, hey, hey, smart people, can you get the places in the country where there's too much rain and bring it over here? Like, it just seems like something that could be done, right? They have too much, we don't have enough. Like, get on that, you know? And it's like, yeah, there's the kind of habit of negativity is also a commodity. If it bleeds, it leads. Now we know how algorithms work. We're a lot smarter. Why am I seeing this? Oh, because this business model says that I should see this. We're all a lot smarter about what we are consuming. And I think that to balance out all the negativity and the doom with some really defiant, badass joy, I follow those people too.
Ooh. Thank you, thank you. We're going to have to let our tech crew move to the 11:30 service. So 2 things. First of all, can we just, again, express our appreciation to this amazing group of people, of artists. And then Vijay has offered to play us out or maybe into a different place, so as we go. So thanks, everybody.
So I'll be very brief in my remarks, but so many instrumentalists especially, but I think a lot of musicians turned to the music of Johann Sebastian Bach during the pandemic. And I'd like to play a piece from his 6 sonatas and partitas for unaccompanied violin, which he wrote in 1720, 300 years since the beginning of our pandemic. And in 1720, Bach lost his beloved wife, Maria Barbara. And these pieces were the sort of amalgam not only of his grief, but moving towards joy and acceptance. And I love this idea of, negativity can become its own commodity, right? So let's renounce, relinquish, give back negativity. And here is the heart pulse of joy.